Oh my gosh, I just lost my screen. How is everyone doing today? My name is Sabrina Victoria. This is the Her Talk Show. This podcast is dedicated to a growth mindset. You see, I believe that I know something that you don't know, and I also believe that you know something that I don't know. And the only way for each of us to rise is for us to sit in a room and share all those knowings. For those of you that like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in.
We come to you every day with the best speakers, relationship coaches, spiritual mentors, trailblazers, business owners, authors, young hustlers, podcasters, entrepreneurs, fitness trainers, therapists, financial advisors, and more. We ask our guests one question. What do you know that I don't know? Get ready, because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Talk Show. We have had over 400 women grace the stage here on this platform, and we are adding another one to the list. If you are watching us live, welcome. If you are watching us on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're at so we can send you some love. Either way, if you are watching this video, we would love it if you would share this video on whatever platform you're watching us on so we can get more eyes and more ears on this awesome content. This is Her Talk Show. We inspire you to think outside the box every single time we come on here. Today, I am talking to Nicole Connor. Nicole is here to talk about how to transform our pain into power and purpose so we can claim and embody the truth of who we really are. Since healing herself from the effect of debilitating corporate burnout in 2017, she has been obsessed with the human experience and self-experimentation. Yes, my fave. Wondering who we truly are, where we come from, and what makes us tick. And most important, how and why we continue to self-harm by not actively listening to and learning from the lessons and wisdom embedded in our pain. Ooh, she has spent the past 6 years learning to trust herself so she can root deeply into her purpose and stretch her capacity to learn by doing hard and uncomfortable things. Yes, you're speaking our language. The through line of her life has been her ability to adapt to her environment, connect deeply with others, and distill large amounts of complex information and emotion into stories that connect and transform. Now, instead of depleting herself to increase corporate profits, she serves and creates sacred containers for others to courageously voice, explore, and harvest the medicine inside of their own pain by showing and sharing how she did the same. Welcome, lady.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I resonate so much with just your opening statement because I believe, as I said in my statement, that when we can show up and courageously tell our story honestly, authentically, it gives other people the permission to do the same. And it can just unlock something inside of your subconscious and your psyche that can propel you forward into wells of healing that you didn't even know existed within yourself. So, as you say in the beginning, that you ask, everyone has information that someone else doesn't have. I truly believe in that, and that we really do have to get back into storytelling and getting into the idea that I need your story. I don't necessarily need your solution and your checklist and your 10 ways to hack through the problem that I'm having. I need to hear your story and understand your pain and see how that you were able to transcend and transform that so that I can find the courage to do it for myself.
Yes, I love that. You know, one of the things that I love about podcasting just in general is just really allowing a platform for individuals to be able to share their stories, their journeys, their past experiences. Because when you're at, like when you're going around in your life, right? Like you're just hanging around, you're at Starbucks, you're at the grocery store, sometimes you meet somebody and you kind of think to yourself, you exchange some words or what have you. And sometimes we're talking to people who have gone through some real stuff. Like they've gone through real crazy life experiences. And unless you actually sit down and like have a cup of coffee with them or like dinner or something like this, you never hear these amazing war stories that some people have gone through. So jumping on a platform like this is such a great way to be able to showcase that and really allow individuals to recognize that, like, hey, there's people out here that are doing it, that are going through stuff and they're rising above and really taking some action. So I would love for you to share with us some awesomeness. This podcast is all based around, what do you know? What's your experience? What can you teach us? So
Mhm.
we'd love to kind of hand the stage over to you for a few moments and just kind of hear from you what we're sharing and what we're talking about today.
Sure. So I think a good place for me to start is a little bit with my own story so that you can understand where I'm coming from. So in 2017, I crashed and burned. I went through some serious, serious burnout. I was working at that time anywhere from 80 to 100 hours a week. And I was working not from a sense of purpose, but from a sense of pain. I was working in the finance industry. And at that time, I had been working offshore in private equity. And while I was working offshore and in this other country that required a work permit, the government showed up at one time and said, you don't necessarily have all of the credentials to be here. So we think that a local should have that job and you're going to have to leave. And that put a huge chip on my shoulder, right? Because we tend to move through life with certain levels of imposter syndrome where we don't necessarily feel like we're good enough and qualified enough, and that we always need to try and put our best foot forward and almost fake it till you make it. And that had really been a motto of mine for a long time, fake it till you make it, because I didn't understand um, the wisdom and the knowledge that I was gaining through the act of learning, and I wasn't valuing it the way that it should have been valued. Instead, it was like, "Oh, I'm just trying to keep my head above water, and I'm trying to make it through." So, that brought me to, Montreal in Canada, and I was working in the Montreal office, and again, still working 80 to 100-hour weeks, and it was just burning me to the ground. And I was doing that again because I thought I had something that I had to prove. And because I was showing up for these insane hours and taking on anything that anyone threw at me because I'm like, I can handle it. My shoulders are wide enough. I can do this. I was starting to get very, very resentful. And through this resentment that I was gaining, I was also starting to show physical signs of burnout because I had a back issue that I couldn't seem to resolve, to the point that I remember waking up at 5:30 in the morning and crawling to the bathroom to get ready for work because I couldn't walk. What I was going through was literally starting to cripple me. So when I finally got to the point that I just couldn't handle it anymore, I kind of quit in a firestorm, and then I took a sabbatical from life for about 4.5 to 5 months, and I forced myself into the kind of silent stillness that not many of us get to experience in our life. And while I was sitting in that silent stillness, I came to the realization that while I was sitting there and blaming everyone and everything around me for the circumstances that I found myself in, and I was literally just sick of everyone's shit around me, I now had to get to the point that I was sick of my own shit. And with that came some really hard truths and some honesty that I had to really start to sit with and feel my way through to get to the root of the issues that I was facing. And yes, my job had thrown me into burnout, but that was just a symptom. It was not the actual root cause of why I found myself where I was.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. We have these external factors that pop up in our life that mirror back to us the pain and the issues that we're facing. And it makes it really easy and convenient for us to say, well, that's the problem. It's the government. It's my job. It's my relationship. It's my children. It's my bills. It's all of these other things. But we choose what comes into our life, and that's a really hard truth for a lot of people, because even when you're in a really hard circumstance, we create our own reality. We choose what comes into our life. We attract what comes into our life. And until you can get radically, radically honest with yourself about the things that you don't want to admit to anyone. You don't even want to admit it to yourself until we can start to really have those conversations with ourselves. True healing and the ability to rise up and out of the pain that we're sitting inside of that's creating the lessons that just keep showing up over and over again. It's really hard to start breaking out of those cycles.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. What's the well, first of all, I like how you're saying there's different levels of imposter syndrome. I've never really even thought of that before.
Mm.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, with imposter syndrome and some of the issues that I've run into, it can be the stories that we tell ourselves. It can be the stories that other people tell us. It can be the societal constructs that we work inside of. So we live in a society, specifically in North America, where life is supposed to look very linear and prescribed, right? You go to school, you may go on to post-secondary, you may open a business, you get the qualifications and the credentials that you need. And we tend to put an emphasis and a focus on certification and a higher education above and beyond learning. They're
Mm,
not the same thing, right? So, something that I've really had to come to terms with and grapple with is that the gaining of information and the amount of information that we compile is not the same as learning. And learning only happens through the act of doing. It's through taking that information that we're surrounded by all the time and actually putting it into application. Like, you have to put it into motion. If
mhm,
you're not doing that, you don't know what's going to work for you. You don't know what's not going to work for you. So it becomes really easy to start telling yourself stories that I'm not qualified to do A, B, and C because I don't have the credentials. I'm
mm,
living proof. My only actual credentials through education is I'm a certified interior designer.
mm,
But I've worked in interior design. I've worked in the legal and finance industry. I've worked in construction, and everything has been born out of my ability just to figure it out. As I said in the beginning in my intro, I'm not afraid of doing hard and uncomfortable things. I'm not afraid of throwing myself into situations. Before I did it out of survival mode. I did it going, "Oh my God, I need to get this paycheck. I need to make sure I can pay my bills. I'm just going to throw myself into it and figure it out." Now I look at it and go, I'm ready for this challenge. I can figure this out. I think this is going to expand my capacity to be able to learn even more and to be able to turn this into real world knowledge and wisdom that I can share with other people to say, "Hey, like, you may not have all the goods on paper, but you can still do it. You're still qualified. You're still capable
mm.
of being able to rise into whoever and whatever you want to be." And we have to stop putting ourselves in boxes and blaming the world for putting us in there.
Yeah.
That's a prison that we create in our own mind by thinking that we're not capable and not able to learn.
Yeah. What are your thoughts as far as humans really coming to acknowledge trust, trusting themselves, self acceptance, self responsibility? What's your thought process on all of that?
So I don't think you can trust anything or anyone until you can trust yourself. And it's interesting that you bring this up because I have like a pain pyramid that I operate inside of when I'm working, and I tell everyone before you can rise, you have to halt. And halt being you have to go through this kind of tiered list of honesty, acceptance, loyalty, and then trust.
Mm,
And so when you're talking about trust, the only way you can ever, as I said, trust anyone is if you can trust yourself, but you can't trust yourself until you can be radically honest with yourself about where you're at, who you're surrounded by, what's showing up for you, and how you're actively contributing to the reality that you're creating. And you can lie to a lot of people, but you can't lie to yourself. And it will always pop up for you in one way, shape, or form if you try and dodge the truths and the darker things that you don't necessarily want to address. And through that honesty phase, that's where you really start getting into self-acceptance and self accountability and self-responsibility. And only when we can start to see something and really become accountable and responsible to being honest about what we're seeing and what's showing up, then we kind of move into that acceptance phase. And you have to start going, okay, well, this is what's in front of me. I can't change it. I can ebb and flow with it. I can look for different avenues on how I can tackle this particular issue. But through acceptance, you relieve yourself of the burden that the past can be any different, that you could have done anything differently. It is what is. And when you can really truly accept something, that's where you can begin to forgive yourself for not knowing better and necessarily doing better. You can start to give yourself more empathy and compassion for where you are right now versus where you were before, how far you've come. It opens this kind of sense of grace and gratitude within yourself, to be able to just relieve a little bit of the pressure and start to, yeah, sorry, just relieve some of the pressure, to be perfect and to always have your highlight reel, in front of the world. And then that gives you the opportunity to start showing up for yourself and truly showing up for yourself, because we're also in a society, in an era right now where we're seeing a huge breakdown in relationships, because people are lacking loyalty, but we can't even be loyal to ourselves. There's so much self-betrayal that seeps throughout our lives, whether it's, hitting the snooze button a million times in the morning, not making time for yourself to go for a walk, not making time to properly ensure that you're getting the nutrition that you need. We need to find ways to stop looking at the world and identifying how it's betraying us without looking at how we betray ourselves on a daily basis, because everything we see is this inside out reflection. And it's only when we can, through being really honest with ourselves and accepting where we're at and showing up for ourselves and creating this loyalty within, that we can begin to trust.
Mm.
We can't get to trust without that. You can't have trust without trust. And I truly believe it's this inside out job.
What does HALT stand for again?
Honesty, acceptance, loyalty, and trust.
I love that. What is somebody because this is the thing. People listening live right now, people on the streets just hanging out, going to work, hustling, bustling. No one's sitting around. I don't want to say no one. That's false. Most people aren't sitting around thinking to themselves, I don't trust myself, or I'm lying to myself. Most people do, just in their everyday life, feel as if they are living an authentic life, that they're doing all the things that they should be doing. But there's another level to that. So, as you and I know, so how does one start to question or start to look at whether or not they do honestly trust themselves? They are living in a world of self-acceptance, like real self-acceptance. What's the difference? What are some questions maybe that someone should ask themselves to like reconnect and say, oh, actually, there is some misalignment
Yeah.
with my life.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think a lot of that stems from observation and really being able to tune into your surroundings, because what you are surrounded by can tell you a lot about your inner world and the subconscious things that you're not necessarily paying attention to. So it could be the friends that you're surrounded by, and maybe you have that one friend that's kind of grinding on your gears a little bit, and maybe they're showing you something that you need to just kind of sit with. And maybe instead of there's that saying that when you point your finger at someone, there's three pointing back at you. So if you're going to sit there and complain about what Sally is doing to you, maybe you need to sit there and go, well, do I do this in my life? Is this something that I am guilty of doing as well? I really believe, especially now, just in the social climate, and I try really, really hard not to watch the news because I was so embedded in it for a few years in work that I was doing leading up to this. And the media right now, what we're seeing in the news, how you react to the information that you're seeing can tell you what you may need to work on. And paying attention to how it feels in your body, because I think what we really need to do is kind of drop out of the head. So as you were saying, people aren't thinking, oh, I'm not honest and I'm not loyal or I'm not these things, but you're thinking. We need to start feeling. So how are things making you feel? Where do you feel it in your body when someone says something to you that maybe feels a little out of alignment? Like, do you get that little punch in your gut? Do you feel your jaw tense? Um do you feel your breath leave your body? We really need to start tapping into the physical sensations as well, because that helps us to get a little bit more present. And when we can become present, that's when this information can start to kind of make itself known to you. But in terms of questions, I would say start with, does this feel authentic and true? I truly believe that when someone hears the question, am I honest with myself? They can try and bypass it, but it will eat away with you a little bit, because you can look at every aspect of your life. Am I honest with myself about how I eat? Am I honest with myself about how I exercise? Am I honest with myself about how I describe my life to other people? Am I honest? Like, if I was to sit down and start writing in a journal, can I be honest with myself on that page? Am I withholding? That's where free writing exercises can be really useful. I think it's the morning pages. I can't remember her name, but morning pages, you just sit down first thing in the morning and you just free write and you try not to self-edit. I think people start to become very aware of their triggers when they start to realize how much they self-edit in their life. And it starts to breed the question, am I really being myself, or am I being who I believe needs to keep my environment comfortable? And that can be a very triggering conversation to enter into with yourself, because it's not just your present reality. We start getting into layers of trauma, and it's not just your trauma. It starts getting into the ancestral trauma. And that's a deep rabbit hole. And that's when we start getting into conversations about epigenetics. And Dr. Bruce Lipton he has a book called The Biology of Belief, where he talks about how our bodies cellularly reproduce trauma through generations. So sometimes the issues that we have, they're not necessarily ours. We're not necessarily just carrying the trauma from our own lives and our own experiences. It's through these lenses of our ancestors as well. So it becomes a very layered process. But step one is just observing your reality and see if you can go an entire day without blaming someone else for something that irks you. See if you can take responsibility for all of that. Oh, I can't hear you.
Does Bruce say anything about the cherry blossom experiment?
Ooh, I don't know if he talks about the cherry blossom experiment. I've heard it with others. What he does talk a lot about an experiment that he did, where he was talking about cells in a petri dish and how they always will conform to the environment that they're in. So when we're looking at cells in a petri dish, and if you change the environment that they're in, it will affect the cell. It's kind of like the blood that runs through us. But as women specifically, because I know your audience is predominantly women, all of the eggs that we have in our body right now, we're sitting inside of our grandmother. So we hold the stress and the trauma and the experiences of many generations before us, just based on the way we are reproduced and how we come to be.
The actual eggs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when your grandmother's born, she has all of the eggs that she will ever have in her lifetime. As women, we have the eggs that we will have for our lifetime. So our mothers are in there. And then our mothers have us.
Like the actual eggs?
Mm-hmm.
Or like the DNA of the egg?
The DNA of the eggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I knew that. Okay. That makes sense.
Mm.
Um,
There's
so
another book. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there's another book by Mark Woolen called It Didn't Start With You, and it's all about inherited family trauma. And he goes quite deep into the lineage and how it affects our words and our behaviors and our physical features and our mannerisms, and how a lot of it can be traced through the maternal lineage.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to talk for a little bit about self-harm
Mm.
because, wait, Ella's saying something. She said, the eggs that made us were in our mothers when they were in utero.
Yes.
The eggs that made us were in our mothers when they were in utero. I understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, because as a baby, you have your uterus before you exit the womb. So you're getting all of the serotonin, the cortisol, the dopamine, everything that your mother is ingesting, emotionally, mentally, physically, environmentally, has an imprint on you.
Got it. Which
Yeah.
then is transferred to the eggs,
Correct.
which is what Bruce is talking about.
Correct. Yeah.
That makes sense.
I didn't explain it well. Sorry about that. But yes,
No,
thank you,
that's
Elizabeth.
fine.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's a
that's what
fascinating
the
conversation.
podcast is for. It's like
Yeah.
that's what I'm for. So the people listening who are like confused, I'm their voice. So it's like if I'm not quite comprehending it, they're not quite comprehending it. So that's why I always just double, triple ask because
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah, for everybody else, because this is new stuff that we're learning that we don't obviously that we don't know. Who was the other one besides Bruce Lipton? What was the second author you said?
Mark Woolen, Wollynn. He works more in family constellation work, but he does do a lot about the maternal lineage, and it's fascinating work when you look at how you inherit some of the traumas of your parents, your grandparents, how it shows up through language, patterning, mannerisms, thoughts, beliefs, ideologies, fears, um, things that we don't necessarily understand why we do the things we do. There can be mapping. There's a mapping process that you can use that can trace it back through your lineage. And then there's some really powerful work that you can do to then start shifting that and releasing that. And there's that old shamanic saying that says when you heal yourself, you heal 7 generations, the 3 before you and the 3 after you. And this is a huge part of that work, is being able to clear some of what's commonly referred to as ancestral trauma.
How do you clear what's behind you?
A lot of that happens through presence, learning how to be present. A lot of us, we haul our past into our present every single day. We're always reliving it in one way, shape, or form if we haven't truly healed from it, right? We're either avoiding it, ignoring it, or there's a protective mechanism that we've built around ourselves when it comes to our past, because it could be a fear of recreating it. It's something that we're not usually, I would say, consciously aware of, but we are seeing it play out at a larger scale right now, because if you do look at the media, the news cycle seems really familiar, right? We're seeing things repeat and we're like, how did we get here? How are we looking at another financial crash? 15, 18 years later, like, we just did this. Did we not learn anything? How are the same things happening? How 20 years later has no one learned anything? And it's the idea that your past can hold your present hostage, and it can block you from learning the lessons that need to be learned and cleared. So when it comes to the ancestral trauma, it could be breaking addiction, it could be breaking financial habits, it could be breaking a lack mentality, it could be breaking nutrition and fitness, it could be breaking how you raise your children. That can fundamentally change the generations that go in front of you. But the only way you can really do that is to truly not be held hostage by your past. And that's I think that's a lot of the work that we're here to do right now, and a lot of the clearing that we're here to do is to learn how to be present, to learn how to drop out of the head and into the heart, and learn how to feel our way through this world instead of trying to think and logic our way through the world. And that's far easier said than done. But I do think it is the work that a lot of us are here to do right now.
Makes sense. I want to talk for a little bit about self-harm,
Mm,
because I think a lot of times people think self-harm, people think sitting in a bathtub with a razor blade,
yep.
but there's several different kinds and levels. So, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think in my experience and in what I um, have witnessed within myself, ways that it goes back to kind of halt and the honesty and the acceptance and the loyalty and the trust. Ways that I have perpetually self harmed over the years is by depleting myself for others. Being in situations that are very codependent, where I'm suppressing my own needs for what I believe is the greater good. But when you're not taking care of yourself first, you're really of no use to anyone. Um, for the example of using my job, I didn't have to work 80 to 100-hour weeks. There were lots of people in my office that didn't. They put up the boundaries that said, "Nah, I'm not doing that." But I was not capable of instilling those boundaries because of, feelings of not enoughness that I had, or that I had to work twice as hard to be where I was, that I wasn't deserving of the work that I had put in that allow me to sit at the tables that I was sitting at. So I think when we think of self-harm, we like you said, we tend to think of the extremes, and we tend to think of it at a physical level, but we're not necessarily thinking of it at a mental level or an emotional level, and how we deprive ourselves of joy on a regular basis. How often do people say, "I don't have time to sit down and enjoy a book," or "I don't have time to just go for a walk in nature. I don't have time to walk away from my phone. I'm not able to do that." To me, those are all forms of self-harm, because they pick away at your life force, your ability to be able to reset and recalibrate and come into a more grounded state of being. So I think when we are looking at self-harm, it would be a worthwhile exercise for people to just sit down and take stock of all of the things they wish they could do. But what are things that you wish you could do? Simple, simple things on a daily basis that you are not able to give yourself, or that you believe you're not able to give yourself. And see if you can start finding ways to factor those into your life, because the the ripple effect of the deprivation that comes from stretching yourself so thin for everyone else and not leaving enough time for yourself is why people right now, where we're at in society, people are so sick, stuck, and stagnant, and they don't know why. And it's we just pour our cup into everyone else. And social media, I mean, I know we're on social media right now, but social media is a big one. It's a big one. And one of the ways I was self-harming was spending far too much time on social media. So I got rid of it. I've been off social media since 2019. I run a digital business off social media, and I'm looking for new and innovative ways to do that, because for me, going into that space, the rabbit hole that I can go into, and the spiral that it can create, and the mood fluctuations that occur with it, are just not worth it to me. To me, they're harmful, so I tend to steer away from it.
Fantastic.
Mm.
We have quite a few people watching live. Thank you so much for being here. And for those that are watching on the replay, if you could hashtag replay wherever you're at so we can send you some love. But I want to ask Nicole, Grand Rising
Yes,
is your baby.
it is my baby.
Tell us a little bit about Grand Rising. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and tell us a little bit about who should be contacting you. For those that
Sure.
are watching live, they're resonating with you. Who do you help?
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a word nerd and I like paying attention to the words that we use and the frequencies that they emit and how that changes what we do and don't believe about ourselves. So for me, Grand Rising is how we can lift ourselves up every single day and choose every single morning instead of saying like a good morning, which is kind of a good death, that we're choosing to rise every day, that every day we have the ability to make different decisions and fundamentally change our life. So Grand Rising is the platform that I started. And I also have the Grand Rising experience, which is my podcast and my writing, because I believe that when we choose to enter into a space of healing and we choose to get sick of our own shit and decide to take charge of it and take accountability and responsibility for it, that it's within all of us to have our own grand rising experience and be able to elevate day over day our life, and not only our life, but the life of our loved ones, our family, and our community, simply by elevating ourselves. So, the Grand Rising Experience is an audio visual magazine that is hosted exclusively on Substack. And I use Substack because it is predominantly a censor-free platform, and they really allow you to navigate your own artistry and be able to find your own voice and allow it to resonate with a very large group of people. So, within the Grand Rising Experience on Substack, I have a weekly newsletter that I put out. I have a weekly podcast where I dive deeper into topics such as the dark night of the soul, imposter syndrome, why I'm redefining what it means to be an entrepreneur so that I can create a life of value, getting into the difference between leadership and elderhood and why I don't believe they're the same thing. And we need to resurrect elderhood as our way forward. And in the Grand Rising Experience on Substack, I also have a membership called the Cocoon. And the Cocoon is where we get to go inward as a community on monthly live calls and go over a topic of the month. For the month of April, right now, we're looking at the general pyramid, the HALT pyramid, to start figuring out how that can apply to your life. And when we come onto these monthly calls, it gives everyone the opportunity to voice their story in a safe space, in a non judgmental, loving space where you can show up authentically. And if you have something that you'd like to say and share, you can do that. If you just want to sit back and observe and do more inner work with that, you can do that. But it really is just a space for members to start to explore what it means to get radically honest and start diving into the deep end of self-forgiveness and start climbing the ladder to find that self-loyalty and trust so that you can really start transforming your life. So that's a membership that I have on Substack right now, and it's only $11 a month. And you can join right now and you get your first 7 days free. And we have a call on Saturday, actually, this Saturday at 3 o'clock on the 15th of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern. We do our group calls. So I extend that to everyone. And something that I'm factoring into the Grand Rising experience as well is I can't do this all by myself, just like you. So I have an open space for collaboration, and I'm looking for people who can contribute to the space, whether you're a practitioner or a wellness coach, or if you have experience with perhaps your own uprising. You can either come on the podcast, you can write an article, or you can do a written interview. And there's a full collaboration space on there as well so that we can start uplifting and rising through each other's stories.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why do you do what you do?
Because I think I was put here to do it. I think I've gone through a lot in my life, and I've always found a way to make it through. And even when I think something is too hard or the burden's too heavy, I have to remember that I'm still here. I've been able to continually pull myself through some really dark and heavy times throughout my life. And ever since I was little, I've always been a magnet for other people's stories. Like, as you were saying earlier, you never know what someone is thinking or feeling when you're standing next to them. I, I have an entire life of strangers just coming up to me and pouring out their life story and collecting those stories. So I believe that I'm here to help people do this, that I have the courage to sit here and voice my story and to um, unabashedly allow others to learn from it. And I've learned how to break those shame spirals for myself. I don't have shame over where I came from and what I've experienced and how it's made me who I am today. And if that can give other people the courage to do the same, like, that's what I believe I'm here to do.
Where can people find you on social media?
I'm not on social media. Yeah, so you're not really gonna find me there. I'm on Pinterest. You'll find me on Pinterest. So if you look up the Grand Rising Experience on Pinterest, you will find me there. But the best way to get me is you can see my name there, grandrising.live. That will redirect you to my Substack page, or you can send me an email at support@grandrising.live. But that's where you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate all the goodness that you shared today. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Just thank you so much for having me on today. And just a message to anyone who's listening: if you're in a painful time and if you feel like you may have hit your rock bottom, I trust me, I've been there. And sometimes rock bottom can be reframed as the new foundation where you can plant yourself to bloom and grow. And it's it's the perspective that you choose. And I believe in you and I love you and I know that you can find that inner strength. And if you need support, there's always support out there to be found, even if it's not in your um, immediate circle. You can seek out people like Sabrina, myself. There's lots of other beautiful men and women out there that are willing to hold you when you need it. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
thank
Well, if
you.
you resonated with Nicole and all the goodness that she shared today, be sure to connect with her at grandrising.live. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure that we all continue to rise. Thank you so much for those of you that joined us live on the replay, and Nicole Connor. We appreciate you very much. This room is filled with women who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people